Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel for the 5th episode in the current series of videos that I'm recording within Train Sim World 2. In this episode I wanted to take a look at another of the routes which comes with the base game, Train Sim World 2, and so I'm going to be driving a full run of the London Underground Bakerloo Line in the southbound direction, between Harrow and Wealdstone and Elephant and Castle, for a total journey distance of just under 14.5 miles. We will be calling at every station along the way, and with something like 25 stops on this journey, I'm not going to list them all here at the start of the video as I usually do, just because I think it might be a little bit long-winded. But obviously we'll be going through the stops as I drive through the journey. For those who'd like to replicate this journey, then I'm driving in timetable mode, train 201 Delta-11, which is the Harrow and Wealdstone to Elephant and Castle service at 11:34, and I've set the season and weather conditions to autumn mist. And I actually chose misty for this route just to try and stabilise the frame rates a little, as I noticed the frame rates seem to be a bit more stable when using misty conditions, as I'm trying to get the most consistent frame rate possible when recording videos at the minute, but I've been having a little bit of trouble, as I mentioned in a previous video. The train that I'm driving on this journey is of course the London Underground 1972 stock, which is in use throughout this route, and in fact it's the only type of train used on the Bakerloo Line. They were originally built to supplement the Northern Line's 1959 tube stock fleet as a replacement for some of the, well, very life expired at the time 1938 stock. Although of course if you watch my Isle of Wight video recently, you'll know that the 1938 stock, or at least some of it, managed to make its way to the Isle of Wight and remain in service until this year. So the 1972 stock has been in service since the 26th of June 1972. It is the oldest electric multiple unit currently in service anywhere within the United Kingdom that I'm aware of, at 49 years old. They were manufactured by Metro Camel and built at Washwood Heath here in England between 1972 and 1974. There's a total of 7 coaches for each train, though each train's actually formed of 2 units, a 3-car and a 4-car unit, which are permanently coupled together. And there's a maximum capacity of 851 people in each train. The total length of each train is just under 114 metres, or around 372 feet, and they have a maximum speed of 45 miles per hour, which we will only be able to get up to on this journey while we're on the overground sections of the route. In fact, once we've reached the underground section of the route just after Queen's Park station, then the maximum speed limit for the journey will be 35 miles per hour. I've now jumped into the cab of the unit to set up the train ready for departure. So the first thing I'm going to do is just turn the HUD on, a bit like I did in the Isle of Wight video, just because I find it really difficult to see the control key just behind the driver's seat here. So I've just turned the HUD on, and now if I move the mouse to where the control key is and it illuminates, you just click that once to insert it, and then move the mouse up slightly until it changes to say that you're now highlighting the control switch. And now at this point you just need to click and drag down to the bottom to turn the control switch on. The next thing we need to do is insert the reversing handle, so if you just click there, we've now inserted that, and I now need to move that to the INT position, which stands for Inter. I just press the S key 3 times, which gets that into the right position, and now we need to start charging the brake system. So what I need to do now is initially move the combined traction and brake handle that you can see there to the emergency position, just by pressing A once. And now it's in the emergency position, I need to move it up towards the off and release position. And we're now in the off and release position for a moment. I just press Q to reset the alarm, and now let's just reapply the brakes as we started rolling forward just for a moment there. So I'm going to just turn off the HUD at this point, as we shouldn't need it from now on in this video. As I inserted the control key and so on, it actually automatically turned on the headlights at this end of the train, so we don't need to worry about turning them on. So I'm going to press I now to turn on the instrument lights so that we can see the instruments, which is going to be especially important as we get to the underground sections of the route a bit further up. So just to mention, the combined traction and brake controller, which we looked at a moment ago, it has 3 steps of power: shunt, series and parallel, parallel being like step 3 or notch 3. And then if you move it back to the off position and then move it into braking, generally on this journey I don't want to go above step 2 braking. Step 3 is the very maximum as far as I'm aware, but step 2 is generally what I try and do for passenger comfort. Often step 1 braking, to be quite honest, nervous when entering the stations, especially on the underground section of the route. So yeah, the speedometer is measured in miles per hour, and as already mentioned, the maximum speed for this journey is going to be 45 miles per hour. Now what I'm going to do is just set the destination display. So you can see there it says not in service, and if you look below that you can see sort of a little lever there. So if I just click on that and start twisting it, and we're just getting it into the right position, and now it says Elephant and Castle. You do actually need to do this at the other end of the train. I have already done it before starting this recording, but if you're driving yourself, you're going to find that if you go to the opposite end of the train, it actually says not in service. So you need to jump out the train at the very start, go right to the back, change the destination display, and then come running right back to the front again, which I will say does delay you. And I have found on timetable mode on this route, it's actually really difficult to stick to the timetable, and I normally end up about 5 or 6 minutes late when arriving at the destination. So we have two whistles on this train. We've got the spacebar whistle and the alternate, which is with the N key. Now the final thing that I need to do here, just to set up ready for departure, is just on the opposite side of the cab to the driver's side, we need to press the saloon lighting and heat and vent set button, which is the second from the top here. So I'm just going to click that now, and that's now turned on the passenger lighting, and we've also turned on the heating, of course, especially as it's an autumn day in the UK. It's probably going to be a bit chilly for the passengers otherwise. So yeah, we are now set up ready for departure. We're just going to take another quick look outside the train, and then we're going to depart just pull into Harrow Wealdstone station just ahead before starting out on our journey towards Elephant and Castle. So pulling away from the siding there, the speed limit here is 10 miles per hour, and I've just shut off the power at this point to allow the train to coast. We're now going to coast at 10 miles per hour, just up to our stopping point here at Harrow Wealdstone Station. And here at Harrow and Wealdstone, like pretty much every station on this route, we need to stop at the end of the platform. So I'm just using some light braking here, just to bring our speed down, and we should now be stopping in just about the right place. Departing away from Harrow and Wealdstone Station, the speed limit is immediately 45 miles per hour, with around 1 mile to go to our first stop, which is Kenton. Just to mention, for those who don't know, the route that we're running alongside on the left-hand side here is in fact the West Coast Main Line out of London Euston. Unfortunately, we don't have any trains suitable for running on that route as AI currently within TrainSim World 2, but hopefully that might potentially be fixed in the future. In the meantime, I do think that just looks a little bit bare on the West Coast Main Line as we're driving past, knowing how busy that route is in reality. Just in the distance there, you can see there's a footbridge coming up, and at that footbridge I'm going to idle the power to allow the train to coast. We have now reached the speed limit of 45 miles per hour. And just coming up ahead, you can see another overbridge, and the platform at Kenton Station is immediately after that bridge. So I'm just going to start applying the brakes now, just a bit before we get there. Initially it's step 1. And just to issue a correction, it appears there's actually 4 steps of braking rather than 3, as I said at the start of the video. I'm now making a third step of brake application because I thought our speed might not be coming off quick enough, but actually that probably brought our speed off a little bit too quick now. So just release the brakes for a moment and then stop right here at the end of the platform. Departing away from Kenton, the speed limit is still 45 miles per hour, with around 0.9 miles to go to the next stop, which is South Kenton. Another train that's really missing for AI on this route that I should mention is, of course, the London Overground Class 378. So whilst we are on the London Underground here, this route is also shared with London Overground trains coming out of Euston to Watford Junction. So in reality, if you wanted to go between, say, I don't know, Wembley and Harrow, you could take the London Underground trains on these tracks, or you could take the London Overground trains on these tracks. The footbridge just coming up, I'm going to idle the power just after this. I've actually stood at this footbridge many times. Just to the right of us is Northwick Park, which is a very large park there, with a hospital in the grounds. So I'm shutting off the power now, and I'm just going to apply some braking to start bringing our speed down. I might have braked just slightly too early. You can see the platform coming up just ahead. I was braking a bit early there. Now entering the platform, and once again we need to stop right at the end. I'll say right at the end, pretty much by the screens that you just saw on the right hand side there. Departing away from South Kenton, the starting speed limit is still 45 miles per hour, with around 0.6 miles to go to our next stop, which is North Wembley. Now that we're doing just above 35 miles per hour, I'm going to shut off the power at this point. You can see a big overbridge coming up just ahead, and the platforms at North Wembley Station are immediately after that overbridge. So I'm going to apply the brakes in a moment just before we enter the platform here. You can see the mirror and the screens just at the end of the platform here, which is roughly the correct place to stop. Departing away from North Wembley, the speed limit here is still 45 miles per hour, with around 0.8 miles to go to the next stop, which is Wembley Central. I'm going to shut off the power now as we pass the large overbridge there on the left-hand curve, and you can see Wembley Central station coming up just ahead. Now going to start applying the brakes to bring our speed off. And the stopping point here at Wembley Central is around the area of the footbridge just coming up just here. Departing away from Wembley Central, the speed limit is just about to drop to 40 miles per hour in a moment, and we've got around 1 mile to go to the next stop, which is Stonebridge Park. So we're about to start a steep downward gradient here as we're about to dive and then pass under the West Coast Main Line. So in a moment I'm just going to reduce the power just to allow the train to coast at this point. So now we're doing around 35. I've just shut off the power here, and we just passed the 40 mile per hour speed post there. I will use the brakes in a moment to control the speed if necessary, just to ensure that we don't break that 40 mile per hour speed limit. And we're now passing under the West Coast Main Line, and we're going to re-emerge on the opposite side. So the West Coast Main Line from this point will now be on our right. At this point we're about to start a steep upward gradient as we climb away from the underpass there, and the speed limit's just gone up to 45 miles per hour. So we're in full power, but as you can see we're not really gaining much speed at present due to the steep upward gradient that we're currently on. The gradient's about to shallow out now. We're passing some buffer stops that you can see on the left there, but as we reach the next set of buffer stops just coming up, I'm going to idle the power to allow the train to coast. So we'll just reach that now. And I'm going to apply the brakes for our stop at Stonebridge Park as we reach this junction just coming up. So I made an initial step 2 brake application just to bring that speed off a bit quicker. I've now reduced to step 1, and I'll increase as we're getting closer to the end, just to try and stop in the correct position by the screens on the left that you can see there. Stopping just slightly early, release the brakes, reapply, and we should now be stopped in just about the right place. Departing away from Stonebridge Park, the speed limit is still 45 miles per hour, with around 0.9 miles to go to the next stop, which is Harrow. Just continuing to accelerate towards the speed limit at this point, but I'm going to idle the power as we reach the curve which is coming up just after this next signal here. So the power's now in idle, and I'm just looking out for the platform ahead, ready to start applying the brakes. See the platform is just coming up, so I've got the brakes initially in step 1 at this point as I brake quite early, I will increase if necessary as we get closer towards the end of the platform. So we've just passed the warning for an upcoming 30 mph speed restriction, which comes into force shortly before our next stop at Wealdstone Junction. And so we should now be stopping in just about the right place. Departing away from Harlesden, the speed limit is still 45 mph with 900 yards to go to the upcoming 30 mph speed restriction and 0.6 miles to go to our next stop, which is Wealdstone Junction. So we're currently on a steep downward gradient, which is bringing our speed up quite quickly. And I'm just accelerating at this point, and then just after we've passed under this bridge here, we're now going to be on a steep upward gradient. So at this point I'm just going to coast and just allow the train to naturally lose some speed. The 30 mph speed restriction comes into force as we reach the next signal, so I'm going to apply the brakes just as we approach that signal to ensure that we have slowed down in time. Correction, it's not at the next signal, sorry, it's at the next overbridge. I made a bit of a mix-up on my notes there, certainly, but I slowed down to 30 in time, and we're now coming into Wealdstone Junction station. We should now be stopping in just about the right place. Departing away from Wealdstone Junction, the speed limit here is still 30 mph with around 0.9 miles to go to our next stop, which is Kensal Rise. So I'm just going to idle the power for a moment to allow the train to coast, and I will apply a little bit of power if we lose some speed along here, just to try and maintain the 30 mph speed limit. The speed limit will shortly be going up to 45 mph, so I'm just looking out for that now. Just at this signal here, there's a very low to the ground speed post just behind it. That's where the speed limit's going up to 45, so I'm just going to wait for a moment just to make sure that the back of the train has cleared. And we should now be able to start accelerating towards that roughly at the gantry post you can now see on our right on the West Coast main line, which was just before the buffer stops there. So we're now going into a tunnel. Immediately as we exit this tunnel, we're then coming into Kensal Rise station. Shutting off the power, and I'm just preparing to brake just before we reach the platform here. And as always, I'm aiming to stop right at the end. And so we should now be stopped in just about the right place. Departing away from Kensal Rise, the speed limit here is still 45 miles per hour, with 0.6 miles to go to an upcoming 15 mile per hour speed limit, and 0.8 miles to go to the next stop, which is Queen's Park. So now coming up on a signal just ahead with the feather indicator, indicating that we will be turning to the right at the next junction. So I've just shut off the power at this point and I'm now going to start applying the brakes for the upcoming 15 speed limit, which comes into force at the junction itself. Possibly braking a little bit too early there, so I've just released the brakes for a moment. And I can now see the speed post coming up just ahead. Just get some light braking now to bring us down to 15. So the speed limit now remains 15 miles per hour all of the way into Queen's Park Station. And at Queen's Park, as I mentioned earlier, this is really where the driving experience changes. So for this point we've been pretty much all overground, but from Queen's Park we then dive into the tunnels under London and we remain in the tunnels for the rest of the journey to Elephant and Castle. One of the difficulties though with driving through the tunnels is that Train Sim World won't let me press the usual keyboard commands to go to external views, so I do apologise, but the external views within the tunnels will be extremely limited in this video, and it'll be more just a case of looking out the driver's window at the station itself. So I was braking and slowing down a little bit too early there. But once again we need to stop right at the end of the platform. We should now be stopped in just about the right place. Departing away from Queen's Park, the speed limit here is still 15 miles per hour, with around 850 yards to go to the next stop at Kilburn Park. And in a moment we're about to start a steep downward gradient as we head towards the tunnels, so I've just shut off the power to allow the train to coast at a little bit below 15 miles per hour. I'm now going to use the brakes for speed control to ensure that we don't break the speed limit. The speed limit here is now going up to 35 miles per hour. We are still on the steep downward gradient and we can't really accelerate to the 35 until we're approaching the next signal a little bit closer. And then I'll just give it all the power we've got to try and get as fast as we can before the next stop. So we're still on a steep downward gradient entering this tunnel here. But what I need to do now in a moment, as we get towards 35, which we are doing now, I've just shut off the power to allow the train to coast. Apply just some minor braking to ensure that we don't break the speed limit. The gradient does now level out along here. And you can now see the station coming up. So as soon as I saw the station, I made an initial step 2 brake application. I've just reduced to step 1. We'll go between 1 and 2 to try and bring our speed down for the correct stopping point. One of the things I do notice on this route in Train Sim World is that there's actually stop markers in real life on the London Underground which are missing on this route for some reason. Departing away from Kilburn Park, the speed limit here is still 35 miles per hour, with around 800 yards to go to the next stop at Maida Vale. So as we reach 35 miles per hour, I'm just going to shut off the power and allow the train to coast. And we're going to coast all of the way to Maida Vale station. Coasting at this point, and pretty much like with Kilburn Park Station, I'm just looking that as soon as we see the platform, that's the moment that I'll apply the brakes. So you can see the tunnel exit now, the platform coming up, and the brakes are on. I initially made a step 1 brake application, which is bringing our speed off quite nicely here. Departing away from Maida Vale, the speed limit here is 35 miles per hour, but with just 110 yards to go to an upcoming 30 mile per hour speed restriction, and 900 yards to go to the next stop at Warwick Avenue. So we've just entered the 30 mile per hour speed zone. It's actually very difficult to see the speed posts on this route, but I did notice the small white post just to the right of us there. So I've just shut off the power at this point. I'm just going to apply a light bit of braking, in fact, as we are on a downhill grade temporarily. I'm now allowing the train to coast at this point. The speed limit should shortly be going back up to 35 miles per hour. That's it with the short, sharp left curve there. We've just reached the 35 mile per hour speed zone. We can now accelerate as we reach that signal there. You can now see the station. We're coming in pretty quick, so I've just made an immediate step 2 brake application to bring our speed off quite quickly, and now I've reduced the braking to step 1. We should now be stopped in just about the right place. Departing Warwick Avenue, the speed limit here is 35 miles per hour with 800 yards to go to an upcoming 25 mile per hour speed restriction and 0.6 miles to go to the next stop at Paddington. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to idle the power as we reach 35 miles per hour. At that point we should have around 400 yards to go to the upcoming 25 limit. The train's now coasting at this point. What I'm looking out for now is a double green signal on the left, which you can see just coming up just now. The 25 mile per hour speed limit comes into force just before the next signal, so I'm going to brake as soon as that signal is in sight. So we're now down to 25 just in time. I'm going to allow the train to coast at 25 into Paddington Station here. There's going to be some very loud screeching as we come into Paddington, much like there is in real life, due to the extremely sharp curve here. Now stopped in just about the right place. Departing away from Paddington, the speed limit here immediately drops to 20 miles per hour with 680 yards to go to the next stop at Edgware Road. I'm just going to coast the power now just below 20, just because there's a short, steep downward grade here, and I may need to use the brakes to control the speed as well. I'm now just going to allow us to coast at 20 for a moment. We just passed the signal there. We're getting close now to an upcoming, well, just past it there. The 35 mile per hour speed limit comes back into force, but it's dropping soon down to 30. We can accelerate just as we pass the next signal there. So we're only 150 yards to an upcoming 30 limit, so there's no point in trying to accelerate up to 35. Once we reach 30, I'm just going to allow the train to coast, and I'm going to brake as we come into the platform. Apologies if you heard the ringtone on my phone just as we were coming in here. I thought I'd silenced my phone, but apparently not. Stopping slightly early, and yep, we should now be stopped in just about the right place. Departing away from Edgware Road, the speed limit is immediately dropping to 25 miles per hour, with 580 yards to go to the next stop, which is Marylebone. Never been quite sure how to pronounce Marylebone, whether it's Marylebone, Marylebone. I've heard quite a few different pronunciations, and no one seems to know what's correct and what isn't. So we've now got to 25 miles per hour. Just allowed the train to coast at this point, and we'll just brake as we enter the platforms at Marylebone Station. So Marylebone is the second so far of the stations on this route that links to a major London terminus, the first of course being Paddington. So the second is Marylebone, and I think we've got one more on this route, which would be Waterloo. So now entering the platform, I probably braked a little bit too early there. So now reapply the brakes. Once again, another station with a very sharp, screechy curve in the platform. And we should now be stopped in just about the right place. Departing away from Marylebone, the starting speed limit here is still 25 miles per hour, and we've got 550 yards to go to the next stop at Baker Street. So pretty much like between Edgware Road and Marylebone, as we get towards 25 miles per hour, I'm now going to shut off the power to allow the train to coast. I'll just now coast all of the way to the next stop, braking just as we're entering the platform. We should now be stopping in just about the right place. Departing away from Baker Street, the speed limit here is still 25 miles per hour with 170 yards to go to an upcoming 30 mile per hour speed limit and 700 yards to go to the next stop, which is Regent's Park. Just past the small T sign just to the right there in the tunnel, indicating that the speed limit's now going up to 30 miles per hour. We'll just cut off the power for a moment just to make sure that the rear of the train has passed that speed board. And now we can start accelerating up towards 30, and then as we reach 30 I'm going to shut off the power and allow the train to coast all of the way to Regent's Park. Departing away from Regent's Park, the speed limit here is still 30 miles per hour, with just under 600 yards to go to an upcoming 25 mile per hour speed limit, and 0.6 miles to go to our next stop at Oxford Circus. So the 25 mile per hour speed limit comes into force at the next signal we encounter in the tunnel, so I'm just accelerating up towards 30 now, and you can see the signal just coming up ahead. So I've just shut off the power at this point. I'm going to brake as we get closer to the signal, just to ensure that we're down to 25 in time. Might brake slightly on the early side there, but just braked us down to 25. At this point we've got around 500 yards to go to our next stop. And we just passed the 25 speedboard there. There is a short, steep upward gradient coming up, but the speed limit is also dropping further down to 20 miles per hour. So I'm just allowing the train to coast at this point, as I'm not sure exactly where the 20 limit starts, but I think we might have just passed the post on the right-hand side. That's one of the difficulties I find with driving on London Underground in the tunnels, is it's very, very difficult to see where the speed posts are. I'm giving us a bit of power now, just as we lost some speed. And now I've shut off the power again at 20 miles per hour. Departing away from Oxford Circus, the speed limit here is 20 miles per hour, with 870 yards to go to the next stop, which is Piccadilly Circus. So I've now shut off the power to allow the train to coast, but we've actually got a downward gradient here. So I've just used the brakes to try and control the speed to ensure that we don't break the 20 mile per hour speed limit. Now along here, the speed limit actually goes up to 30 miles per hour, but immediately afterwards drops back down to 20. I say immediately, within about 100, 150 yards afterwards. So there's very, very little point in accelerating above 20 miles per hour between here and Piccadilly Circus. I should also mention, looking at the stop after Piccadilly Circus, that I was talking about stations connected, or should I say London terminal stations connected to the National Railway network earlier. And I said there's 3 on this route, but I missed one, which would be Charing Cross, which is coming up after Piccadilly Circus. So the speed limit's now gone up to 30 miles per hour, but as I said, it's very quickly dropping back down to 20, so I see very little point in accelerating here. I'm just still using the brakes for speed control to keep us at around 20 miles per hour. And we should now be stopped in just about the right place. Departing away from Piccadilly Circus, the speed limit here is still 20 miles per hour and immediately going up to 25 miles per hour. And we're on a down 1.3% grade, so I might need to use the brakes for speed control in a moment. Whilst the speed limit is going up to 25 miles per hour, the speed limit is dropping down to 20 again, immediately at the next signal. So there's absolutely no point in accelerating here. So So we're on a shallow downward gradient pretty much all of the way to Charing Cross, so I'm going to need to continue to use the brakes for speed control. Brake slightly harder than I needed to there, but we should now be stopped in just about the right place. Departing away from Charing Cross, the speed limit is still 20 miles per hour, so in a moment I'm going to shut off the power just below 20 to allow the train to coast at this point. The distance to the next stop is 440 yards, and the next stop is Embankment. In real life, I would not recommend taking the underground between Charing Cross and Embankment, simply because it is literally quicker to walk. By the time you've got down onto the platform at Charing Cross and then onto the train and got to Embankment and come up again, you could have probably been there 5 minutes sooner if you just walked it. So I ensured that we didn't go above 20 miles per hour there as we headed towards Embankment, and of course I'm stopping here at the end of the platform. Departing away from Embankment, the speed limit here is still 20 miles per hour with 90 yards to go to an upcoming 35 mile per hour speed limit, and 660 yards to go to the next stop, which is Waterloo. So I've just shut the power off there at 20 miles per hour to ensure that we didn't break the speed limit. We can accelerate up towards the new speed limit as we approach this next signal just coming up. But whilst the speed limit is going up to 35, we're actually very close to an upcoming 25 mile per hour speed limit at the following signal. So there's no point in accelerating above 25 between Embankment and Waterloo. We're actually on, or will be in a moment, on quite a steep upward gradient, so you're going to have to use a low to medium power setting to try and maintain the speed. The speed limit is now 25 miles per hour once again. And we should now be stopped in just about the right place. Departing away from Waterloo, the speed limit here is 25 miles per hour with 90 yards to go to an upcoming 30 mile per hour speed restriction, and 700 yards to go to the next stop, which is Lambeth North. So whilst the speed limit does go up to 30 in this tunnel, it's a bit like some of the other tunnels along here, that it soon drops back down to 25 miles per hour, so there's absolutely no point in accelerating along here, and I'm just going to aim to drive at 25 miles per hour all of the way to Lambeth North Station, using between idle and low power to maintain the speed. we should now be stopping in just about the right place. Departing Lambeth North, the speed limit here is still 25 miles per hour with 830 yards to go to the next and final stop at Elephant and Castle. The speed limit does go up to 30 miles per hour right here, but then very quickly goes back down to 25, so that again there's no point in accelerating, and 25 will be the top speed between here and Elephant and Castle. So I've just shut off the power now to allow the train to coast. In fact, I applied the brakes there by accident, so just give us a bit more power to bring us back up towards 25. The next speed change is an upcoming 10 mile per hour speed limit, which comes into force just before Elephant and Castle station. So now on this sharp right curve here, I'm going to apply the brakes for the upcoming 10 mile per hour speed limit, the next signal that you can see just coming up after the curve. I'm braking slightly on the early side. It looks like it might be potentially the following signal. I see the limit did just drop to 20 miles per hour there though. No, we are in fact now down to 10 in time for the junction, which you can see just here. I actually think it's slightly confusing because of the way the speed post is, but I actually think 10 mile per hour speed limit came into force at the 20 mile per hour speed post, so I probably came in just slightly too quick there. But basically, yeah, you want to brake approaching that signal after the sharp right curve just before Elephant and Castle station, and then we cross over the crossovers into this platform, and now I'm going to allow the train to coast towards the end. We should now be stopping in just about the right place. And so here we are, arrival at Elephant and Castle, around 25 stops after leaving Harrow and Wealdstone. So I just wanted to say thank you very much for watching this episode. I do hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, then please don't forget to like and subscribe. If you'd like to find my YouTube channel on Facebook, then please look up PTG Rail, and there's a link to that in the video description. And if you're interested in any of my photography work, which focuses on wildlife and landscapes and railways, then please visit PTG Photography on Facebook. And if you're interested in my future plans for travel documentaries, then please visit PTG Travel, also on Facebook. Once again, thank you for watching.